How-to with the Forge is pretty basic. You can see in the introduction video, basically you lock in your coffee, pour over hot water in the top, and you pull. But what I like to do with this video is give you some quick tips and tricks that I've learned, either that have been designed into the Forge or that have been just discovered over the years. The first tip I'd like to share has been designed into the Forge to help you with locking in the basket a whole lot easier. So what I've done is made so that the Forge logo on the band is indexed to the pressure gauge. So what that means is when you go to thread on your pressure or on your lower ring, you want to line up the logo with the pressure gauge, just like so, and you should feel it settle or click into place. Let me try to see if you can hear that. So once it's clicked, you know that you can just thread it on and give it a little bit of an extra turn at the end. You don't really need to crank this down or hold against the gauge to get a good seal. You should be able to get a good seal just snug and pouring in hot water after that. Having a good kettle is really nice for the Forge. I like the stovetop ones with a gooseneck, like you can see here. This allows you to pour in the top of the Forge very accurately, but it also allows you to preheat the top half of the Forge on the kettle, which is pretty convenient because then you're both heating your brew water in the kettle, as well as if you have a temperature strip, you can make a very repeatable brew temperature when the metal temperature is at a repeatable temperature. So the kettle is a handy extra thing to get for your Forge. Having said that, I've made coffees without preheating. I've made with just taking boiling water from a restaurant or any place that I could get it from in a paper cup, and making one on top of the Forge just like that. So at the end of a shot, when you're done pulling, you may attempt to slip in a cup at the bottom and take out your coffee, things like that. Sometimes you can spill. One thing I've learned is, I will demonstrate right now with just filling up with water. When you go to, let's say right now I'm pulling a shot, and let's say I've decided that right about now I'm done. What I would do is go ahead and pull up about halfway or a little bit less on the piston. What that does is it stops any drip coming out the bottom here. So you can slide out your coffee and put in a drip cup or drip tray. It just keeps you from having to get a mess all over your counter. As you may already know, there's a lot of accessories for espresso, widgets for stirring and preparing your basket, getting the coffee grounds right, tamping. What you really need though for making good espresso, and the number one thing, is a good grinder. And if you can't get an electric grinder that is recommended or is high up on the list, I'd suggest instead going with a hand grinder. You're going to get a lot more precision in the alignment of the burrs at the bottom, which in terms of making espresso is actually one of the most critical things. So invest heavily in your grinder, and if you do have to save some money there, definitely go with a hand grinder. So that's one big tip I can give. Going with extra accessories, a lot of precision baskets, different shaped tampers and handles, and calibrated and conical bottoms and concave and whatever. I don't think all those things are all that important. I do like to use a cup like this. This came on the Sete grinder, and this or some other pitcher or even a paper cup that you can grind into, shake it around, stir up the grounds, and then pour into your basket. That actually makes a big difference. But I guess my point here is spend more time and money and effort into your grinder, and all those sort of WDT grind preparation things, most of that goes away. So the Forge is fairly forgiving when it comes to grind and just in general grinders and all that sort of thing. I think it has a lot to do with the brew path and just being a direct, straight cylinder, and it pours right into it. But at the end of the day, the best grinder that you can afford to start out with, it will always be a good bet. Another tip is with the Forge, there's only really one main moving part. The ring, as I mentioned, is a moving part, but the threads on the stainless steel are very solid. They do break in a little bit as your Forge ages. In other words, they smooth out a little bit. I try to make them so that they're fairly tight, which gives you a very good mechanical seal and gives you longevity. But they will break in a little bit, which is just to say that they'll get smoother over time, which is always better. But the other main moving part of the Forge is the piston, and really the seals against the cylinder. So you can see here, I have some grease at the end. Don't be afraid of grease. You can use what I use to lubricate the factory forges, and I sell little packets of this, is Molykote 111 from Dow Corning. So some people call it Dow 111, 111, whatever you want to call it. It's basically a food grade grease that is meant for lubricating and sealing different seals. It works really well with the Forge. You can let the seals dry out and put it only when you have to. You can see a little bit of coffee fines get into it, so it does darken or blacken over time. What I typically do is just take my hand and redistribute that grease over them now and then wipe it on the top of the cylinder up here, and that just kind of keeps the grease all inside the system. Once it gets pretty dark and hard, you can wipe it off with a rag and then reapply. And I've ran the Forge very dry before with essentially no grease for a long time. The seals will break down a little bit faster, but surprisingly not that much faster. And it does seal pretty well. I haven't had any major failures in that way. Sometimes a little bit of water will leak past one of them, but there's two. Even if it leaks past this one, it just tends to slowly fill up above. But really, what I really like about keeping it greased is that the feeling when you're pulling on the Forge, when you're pulling on the handle on the top, you really get a nice smooth feel. Your pressure on the gauge ramps up very smoothly. If you've ever used other manual lever machines, you know that just after you lubricate your seals, you put it all back together. It operates like a brand new machine, and it feels really, really nice. And the nice thing about the Forge, or the thing that I like, is that keeping the seal greased basically keeps it operating like brand new essentially all the time. Whenever you want to do that, you don't have to really wait and break down the whole machine and take it all apart to do that. You can really do it after every shop. I hope those tips gave you some insight into how to use the Forge, keeping it going and making the user experience a lot better. I hope to have more of them as I discover them or as you guys send them to me. So please do. In the meantime, stay tuned for more videos on making the Forge and improvements to the Forge itself. Thanks.